Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. On the show, I help yoga teachers make sense of the parts of teaching that often feel harder than expected, especially around anatomy and how to apply it to your cues and your sequences, and how to truly feel confident when you're teaching your classes. Here, you'll learn easy, practical ways to understand anatomy using my step-by-step blueprint and how to apply it directly to your cues and sequences so teaching feels clearer and more grounded so you feel present and more confident. We'll also talk honestly about the inner side of teaching, things like self-doubt, growth, and what actually helps you feel confident over time. You can find daily videos and additional support over on my Instagram and my TikTok channels. On both those platforms, I'm at Bare Bones Yoga. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 386. I am recording this on January 8th, 2026, and this will go live on January 12th. So how is your new year going so far? I remember there was a Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm episode, and he said something like he was getting to an argument with somebody at the gym because she said Happy New Year. And he was like, are we still saying that? Isn't it like the 10th or 11th? So I sort of feel like I'm bumping up against the statute of limitations on how long you can say Happy New Year. So this will be the last episode where I bring it up. But I hope you had a good holiday. And I'm curious, I've talked to a couple of listeners about the new format that I kicked off with the first episode that went live last week. And if you're not up to speed, I'm doing short 20-minute episodes and I'm experimenting with this shorter format to really focus on getting to the heart of the matter quicker so that you have more of a focused experience listening. This is in large part driven by my own experience as a podcast listener, where I take several days to go through a 2 or 3 hour Human Lab podcast episode or Rich Roll podcast episode or whatever it is. And I really, just for you, the listener, want my show to be something that's easy to fit into your day. So if you're inclined, just drop me a line on Instagram and let me know what you think of the new shorter format, if it makes it easier for you to consume the episodes. For today, I'm going to share a statement with you that'll give you a lead in to what we'll be talking about on this episode. So I'm going to share a statement with you, and I want to just see how it lands. So I'm just going to launch into it and just sort of see where your mind goes when you hear the statement. Okay, so maybe take a deep breath in with me, deep breath out. Okay, so here we go. The more hours of training you have, the more confident you'll feel. The more hours of training you have, the more confident you'll feel. So how does that feel in your body when you hear it? Where does your mind go when you hear that statement? What kinds of things come up for you? Because that's what we're going to be talking about today. This sort of equivalency that teachers often make, not even by their own devices. It's a belief that they pick up from other people. This equivalency between number of hours that you train and how confident you are. And so I am not here to change your mind. I am not here to convince you. I'm simply here to bring up an important topic of conversation. I mean, that's the point of this show, Conversations for Yoga Teachers. So you can believe whatever you want. I'm simply here, and sure, I'm driven in part by my own belief around this topic, but I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to be more of kind of a thought catalyst. around this particular topic, which I think is really, really so central to being a confident teacher. So I part of what made me think of this is I was thinking back to when I was done with my 200-hour teacher training, and I went to a couple of other experiences with my first teacher, Baron Baptiste, that weren't necessarily on the path to another hours-based training. They were more like standalone training. And at one point, I guess probably several years after that, when I really was starting to dive into the anatomy, I'd connected with a different teacher who had a high degree of expertise in anatomy. And this teacher has a number of programs that are both in person and online. And I went to my first training with this other teacher. And I don't want to get into the name, but that's not really important. And I went to this first training, which was in Spain, by the way. So it was very expensive, a very big investment of time and money. And it was one of the first trainings on this teacher's offering for a 500-hour training registration level. And when I went to this first training, I met a whole bunch of teachers at this week-long event in Spain, this week-long training in Spain, who were affiliated with this teacher, meaning they had been to many different trainings that this person offers. And all of this person's trainings, this was before COVID, were all in places outside the US that probably on average cost about all in about $6,000 to attend between the training, the travel, the lodging, the miscellaneous expenses. So I remember I was in the pool at the place we were staying. We were staying in this villa in Spain. And I was talking to some of the other teachers that had been to a number of this teacher's trainings before. And they were sort of breathlessly talking amongst one another, like, oh, are you signed up to go to the one in such and such a country? Or, and then the person would say, no, I'm not going to that one. Oh, that's such a bummer. Well, I'm going to go to the such and such a one. And people were just like in a frenzy to be in this teacher's training. And I remember being in that pool thinking to myself, where do these people have all the money to be going to all these trainings? And how do these people even know that these trainings are going to help them with whatever problems they're having as a teacher? And my observation of this was that it was just sort of this blindly following and being driven by this belief that I have to get all these hours. And I remember that to me set off a really strong visceral reaction because I knew I was there because I had a very specific reason for being at that training. I knew I wanted to understand more about anatomy. I had done my due diligence on this particular teacher's program in Spain. I knew the content was something that specifically met a problem I had. And so I felt really good about the money I was spending and the time I had invested, I was going to invest in being there because I knew it was going to fix a problem I had, which was understanding anatomy more in the context of teaching yoga. But I did not get that impression from the other teachers that were there. They were just like really sort of brainwashed almost into this is what we have to do. And, fast forward a number of years and I'm running my own program, both my one-on-one program and my accelerator program. And, I can distinctly remember teachers who have enrolled in those programs who have 500 hours of training under their belt. And at the same time, they don't feel confident. So there is proof that hours don't equal more confidence. I mean, I can speak to the proof because I've trained these teachers. They've come to my program after 500 hours of traditional training, still not feeling confident. I can remember one time I was teaching a workshop and one of the workshop attendees revealed, and I say the word reveal because she sort of lowered her voice, and I could just tell, even through Zoom, her whole persona changed, almost like she didn't really want to admit this, but she quietly revealed to me at this workshop, there were a couple of teachers there with her, that she had taken her 200-hour training twice, and she still didn't feel like she understood anatomy. And I have to say, a lot of these conversations I have with teachers, either outward or what I perceive through the words they use, is that there is a little bit of shame there. There's a little bit of shame tied in their mind to the fact that they're taking trainings, they're accumulating hours, and yet they're not feeling more confident. They're telling me, you know, well, I just need to get it, or I just need to practice more, or I just need to take that one more training, or I need to finish this training so that I feel more confident. And whenever I hear the word need, and it's often accompanied by body language and verbal tone and pace of speech and emphasis in the statement, that I can feel in the way the person's saying it, the pressure they are putting on themselves. When someone says to me, I just need to finish this second 200-hour training so that I can feel more confident, I can feel the pressure they're putting on themselves. And so, what were all these teachers looking for? They were all looking for more confidence, but they weren't finding it in more hours. They were stuck on how to feel more confident while teaching, specifically around, and this is why they came to me, understanding movement. I mean, that's in most of the cases why teachers come to me, connect with me, send me DMs, send me emails, reach out to me, because they see when they watch my videos or they listen to the podcast here, I have a good understanding of movement, and it triggers something in them. I want to have that too. So these teachers were stuck on, how can I feel more confident while teaching, specifically around this piece of understanding movement, which is anatomy. And, there's an emotional toll to this state as well, this state of mind, this way of being. And the emotional toll that I see over and over again is the self-doubt. Am I cut out for this? The teacher who talks to me and says, I'm not sure that, you know, my classes are good enough. I'm not sure my sequence is good enough. There's a lot of self-doubt that we can tie back to this lack of confidence, that we can tie back to this lack of understanding just of fundamental concepts in movement. So now that I've sort of laid this out for you, let me give you the opportunity to reframe this, because every time we have a certain state of mind around a particular problem, we also have the opportunity to reframe it. And that is our power as a person with a brain and a person with, a mind. We can reframe something, not to be Pollyanna-ish, but to look at something differently in the spirit of progress or change or self-growth or identity change, that sort of thing. So the reframe I want to offer you is, what if it's not about the hours, but more about properly identifying the problem and then finding the right solution, regardless of the hours? So what if it's not about the hours? What if finding and feeling more confidence is not about the hours? It's more about properly identifying the problem that's blocking the confidence. So I want to take you through just a quick exercise that you can experiment with if you're willing, that ties in nicely with this. For the next 5 classes that you teach, as you're driving home from the class, simply ask yourself, how do I feel? How do I feel about that class I just took? And listen for your intuition to give you the answer. Now, if your intuition says 5 times in a row, I feel awesome, I did great, this doesn't apply to you. But if your intuition says anything else, ask further, right? So let's say your intuition says, I really don't feel so great about that class I just took. So now ask yourself a follow-up question. What causes me, or what's causing me not to feel so hot about that class I just taught? And then listen for the answer. So let's say the answer comes back, I really wanted to be able to walk around the room more, but I found that I needed to continue to go back to the yoga mat and practice with them. And I feel really disappointed in myself that I couldn't walk around more. Okay, great. So now write that down. Write down the date of the class, how you felt, and what caused you to feel that way. And do that 5 times. And then at the end of the 5th class, take a look at the 5 problems you identified. This is smart self-assessment. This is the complete opposite of the story I told you before, blindly just signing up for hours because somehow in your mind you've equated that with maybe feeling more confident. I mean, a lot of yoga teachers equate hours with quote unquote being qualified or being expert enough. But I just gave you lots of examples of people who've enrolled in my program and who have 500 plus hours of training and don't feel confident. So this is the evidence that the confidence is not found in the hours. Maybe it is for some people sometimes, but it's certainly not for everybody all the time. And I want that to give you pause, and I want that to give you relief. Because if it gives you relief because it allows you to see the reframe and the opportunity in the reframe, now you can start to make your own decisions rather than feeling like you're blindly following some predetermined or prescribed path that the yoga industry has sold us. Now, let me just give you a big disclaimer here. I am not bashing hours-based trainings. I am not bashing take your 200 hour, take your 300 hour, take your 500 hour. I'm not bashing that. There are amazing hours-based programs out there. In fact, I support some of those programs by teaching anatomy in some of those programs. So I am not bashing these. All I am saying is you are the one driving the car. You are I mean, I sort of hate to use this term, but you are the consumer of the training. And especially because these trainings are expensive, I would think you would want to be sure that the training is going to fix a problem you have, meet a need that you have. Now, unless you have all the time and money in the world and you can just go to trainings whenever you want with no impact on your wallet or your time, maybe this doesn't apply to you, but most people are not in that situation. And even if they are, let's say you're 65 and you're retired and you're teaching just for fun and you have the time and the money to go to trainings whenever you want. Don't you want to get something out of it rather than just adding on hours and lumping on info? I would think you would. But again, I'm not trying to convince you. You can think whatever you want. But I wanted to add that disclaimer in because this is not a conversation bashing hours-based trainings. The real missing piece for most teachers is that they've made this subtle connection in their mind between I need to get more hours so that I feel more confident. And that's why at the beginning of this conversation, I asked you the question, when you hear this statement, what comes up for you? The more hours of training I have, the more confident I'll feel. And so I'm curious as we go back to that statement, now that I've walked you through this conversation, have you shifted at all in terms of how you feel about that belief. So, what came up for you when you heard this topic? Do you believe that more hours equals more confidence? And if you're willing to experiment with the reframe that I offered and the, how do I feel experiment of the 5 classes and assessing at the end of each class, are you a little bit curious about what you might discover? How does it make you feel to allow yourself to decouple hours and confidence? What becomes possible for you when you loosen your attachment to that belief? So I would love to hear any revelations that came to your mind. So I'll just gently invite you, if you're interested or willing, to let me know how your experiment went. If you do the 5 class experiment and something comes forth for you and you want to share it, I would love to hear it. Or even just something came up for you in listening to this conversation, I would love to hear that as well. So as I wrap this one up, I want to let you know that in the show notes, I'm going to be including a link to my training video on sharing clear cues. So I just wanted to add that in if you're interested in learning more about how I teach a particular cueing methodology based on 4 types of cues. That is all in that video. So I'll include the link right in the show notes. And then the last thing I wanted to say, if you're listening to this in the month of January, I'm teaching a free 2 class series just for yoga teachers focused on clear cueing and doing the walk and talk. These will be 2 live classes. They're live only, there's no replay. And the classes are going to be, I'm just looking at my calendar here, um, Thursday, January 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern, and Tuesday, January 20th at 6 p.m. Eastern. So if those are dates and times that you can come, send me a message on Instagram and I will send you the invites. And these are classes focused on helping you walk away with just a good understanding of action cueing, clear cueing, essential cueing, as well as how to do the walk and talk, whether you're teaching online or teaching in person. So I hope you'll join me at that, one or both of those. And I hope you found this conversation interesting and maybe even helpful and maybe even just a little revelatory. And I hope that it maybe gave you a little bit of pause and maybe a little bit of space between something you thought and just provided you with another opportunity to think something different that maybe serves you in a better way. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll chat with you next week on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If anything we talked about resonated with you, especially around anatomy, cueing, or feeling more confident when you teach, I want you to know that you are not alone. A lot of teachers tell me these are definitely challenges for them. As a thank you for being a podcast listener, I'm offering you $50 off my 4-week Yoga Anatomy Accelerator program. It's a short, focused program designed to help yoga teachers learn anatomy in an easy step-by-step way and how to apply it directly to their teaching. To get the podcast listener discount, you can head over to my Instagram and just send me a DM with the words podcast offer. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.